This week, we read Parashat Chukat in the Torah, and we read, the Israelites arrived in a body at the wilderness of Zin on the first of the new moon, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. Miriam's burial and her death are punctuated in this text. And tonight, we lift up her role as a prophet, her tools as a community leader, and her spiritual courage, which helps her to build community. Earlier in the book of Exodus, we read that Miriam, the prophet, Aaron's sister, picked up a hand drum, toph in Hebrew, and all the women went out after her and danced with hand drums, and Miriam chanted for them. So Miriam HaNeviah, as she is titled, Miriam the prophet, she is not only the woman mentioned in more than 5 books of Torah, more than any other female figure in the Torah, but she also gets both a name and a title. And to today's modern women, we would say, yeah, so what? But in that time, that was quite an accomplishment. And Miriam, along with her name and her title, becomes the first of 4 women to bear the title of prophet. Her sisters that share the title include Deborah and Huldah and Noadiah. And interestingly, while they lived in the ancient Near East in a very gendered existence, the title of prophet and the authority that went with it teaches us that they are conveyors of God's will. Female or male or non-binary, it doesn't matter. Anyone can be a conveyor of God's will. Anyone can have that special title of prophet. The prophet Micah proclaims her name as one of the leaders who will deliver Israel. And for so many of us, these names, the names that we carry, have power. That's why the act of naming a child is considered a form of prophecy. We have entire ceremony and ritual that is surrounded around names. A strong name can ensure a solid soul, one that can endure whatever may come, and a name perhaps rooted in nature, creating a child with ties to the earth and her creatures. Not surprisingly, in the Torah, it's way more common for males to be given names than women. And if you were to count up all the males who received names in the Torah, it would be in the many thousands. Unfortunately, women more often than not go unnamed, and even fewer receive titles. Miriam HaNeviah, Miriam the prophet, stands out because she has both. Earlier in the book of Exodus, we read that Miriam, again, picks up the hand drum and leads the women out. She is mentioned more than any other figure. She is a spiritual leader who shows courage, who uses her tools to gather community together. I imagine Miriam as a modern-day communal leader, a social connector. You know people like this, the one who greets you at the door and says, hey, I really think you should meet Wendy. She's really into art. You might like her, Lindy. And then takes you over to Wendy to have a conversation with her. Those are the communal leaders who, in their own quiet way, can help connect one to the other, building spiritual community, not only in song, not only in dance, not only in prayer, but also in the quiet moments. As I studied the Torah this week, I found myself asking, how does Miriam use her role as prophet and her tools? How does she use that hand drum and her voice to lift up those around her? In art, she's often depicted with tambourines or timbrels. In Hebrew, in the text in Exodus, the word is toph, which means hand drum. And many of us associate Miriam with the tambourine or the more vaguely known timbrel. Scholars remind us that tambourines were not around until the Roman period, over 1,000 years later. Instead, the hand drum is the only percussion instrument mentioned in the Torah. Did you know that, Tara? Bet you didn't know that. Although there are many wind and string instruments mentioned. Archaeological evidence even found statuettes of women, never men, playing a hand drum. In the ancient Near East, the hand drum was considered a woman's instrument. So for me, a former dancer, there is something hypnotic about the power of the drums. It is, in its most primal form, it's a mimic of our heartbeats, of our internal souls that can be felt in our body, in our spirit, when one plays that drum with skill. Studying these scholars, I can picture Miriam standing by a well of water, softly pounding a hand drum, beating the communal heart until the women gather, bodies bouncing, hearts opening, hands raising, all connecting with the primal call of her Toph. Miriam Haneviah picked up the hand drum and all the women followed her, dancing, beating that communal heart. Miriam is also closely associated with water. After Miriam's death is described in this week's Torah portion, it says, the community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. According to Midrash, Miriam, the child, watches behind a sea of reeds as Moses, her brother, is sent down the river in a basket, and she sees him being drawn out of the water by Pharaoh's daughter, Bat Paro. That is where his name comes from. Also, later, she celebrates with Moses and the entire community during the Song of the Sea, which we find in Exodus chapter 15, lifting up her voice in song. And then earlier in this week's portion, in Numbers 19, there is a new ritual instruction called waters of lustration, made of living waters, which are to purify the people from the red heifer. In tonight's Torah portion, immediately following Miriam's death, the people cry for water. The Talmud comments on this verse, teaching us that during the entire 40 years of the Jewish people's wandering, Miriam's well was with them. It nourished them. It gave them water. It gave them comfort. And this was all due to Miriam herself and her merit as a leader of spiritual courage. While Miriam's well is not actually found in the Torah, she is innately connected with water from these pivotal life moments where she takes a leadership role as one who is courageous enough to stand up. In the Shulchan Aruch, we read that there are those who say to draw water from wells or natural springs every Saturday night, because the well of Miriam passes through all wells and natural springs each and every Saturday night. And one who touches it or drinks from it will be healed of all afflictions. So perhaps tomorrow night, find your way to a body of water or a well or a natural spring, and you'll tell me whether the Shulchan Aruch is right. In the Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, we read about the well again. In chapter 5, verse 6, it says, 10 things were created on the eve of the first Shabbat at twilight. The mouth of the earth, which we learned about last week, that swallowed Korach up whole, and the mouth of the well that accompanied the Israelites in the wilderness. It goes on to describe Bilam's donkey's mouth, the rainbow, and many other natural apparitions. Miriam and her well have been capturing the imagination of Jewish dreamers for centuries. I see Miriam, the prophet, using the well like a true communal leader, as a sacred gathering spot from where she might purify and celebrate, sing and gather those around her for an important moment in the community. So what, Kol Ami, do we learn from Miriam this Shabbat Chukat? we learn that sacred spaces and sacred tools and sacred people are the ingredients to bring community together, to uplift one another, and to hear the words of the Shekhinah, the feminine of God. Kol Ami, we have the sacred space. You're in it right now, whether you're in our virtual sacred space at home or you are in the sacred heart of Kol Ami, this sanctuary. And we have the sacred tools, our incredible musicians, our incredible congregants, our lay leaders, our board of directors, our members. We have a spiritual leader or spiritual leaders both in our community-wide here in West Hollywood and in Congregation Kol Ami. We have music, we have song, we have voices. We have all the tools that we need. And what we add tonight is that special spice, Shabbat, the holiest day of the week, this period of rest, a day to connect with one another, a day to uplift our hearts, a day to unplug, a day to gather in community, a day to rest. In our future Kol Ami, may we be nourished by the ever-present waters of Miriam's well. May we be purified by the waters of lustration and uplifted by the songs of her voice and the many voices of our people, Kol Ami, and the beat of her drum beckoning us to be one heart, one community, one Kol Ami. Shabbat Shalom.